In this third section on the benefits of teaching and learning with business cases, the focus is cross-cultural learning. Let's go right to the video interviews to hear what faculty and students had to say about cross-cultural learning with cases. As you watch the video, listen carefully for one benefit to cross-cultural learning that's raised by several people.
Cases have a benefit more than other vehicles of putting students into a close to authentic situation in Russia involving Russians, talking about things that small C culture things that happen in Russia. Stories, novels, short stories, poetry, that's all big C culture. And they get a lot of that elsewhere. The fact that the Russian workplace is at the same time more chaotic and, on the other hand, less energetic than the American workplace is something that they would learn only by doing cases like these.
In a lot of my language classes, they teach you culture, but they really teach it to you. So they tell you, well, this is what it's like. But through these cases, because it's real life situations, you can actually understand it better.
Yeah, business cases definitely make it easier, I think, when you're trying to learn about culture, because the case itself is kind of a role play. So it makes it allows you to, leave your body and kind of look at it from this perspective much easier than if you were just, the textbook was telling you, well, country X has a Hofstede score of this, and they're much more focused on the family, they're much more this, they're much more that. Whereas when you're learning from a case and you put yourself in this decision point, you're like, well, hold on, I know all this back information. How would I act if I were in Thailand? Or how would I act if I were in France? Versus just reading it and saying, the French would act like this, the French would do this. If you were in France, you should do this. But now you're actually there and you're seeing how it's playing out. So because the business case, like I said, is a role play, essentially, it makes it easy for you to jump outside your body and switch perspectives, point of views.
I think when you're teaching a case, a business case that has a lot to do with culture, for me the biggest goal is getting students to really get as close to viewing the case from the other culture's perspective. Gerd Hofstede, and I'm sure I didn't pronounce his name correctly, he talks about culture as software of the mind. That's my favorite definition, because it's just so clear to us. You put in a piece of software and it helps you work through something, but it only works a certain way. And if you try to make it do something else, it can't do it. But if you use another piece of software, you may get another result. So I think if we could get somehow to be able to have different softwares in our head, then we'd be able to alternate perspectives or merge perspectives or move out of our perspectives depending on what stage we may be. So that to me is the biggest thing, because if you understand the other culture and you can really empathize, you can get in their shoes, then you can solve virtually any problem.
Cases definitely have the ability to teach about cultural differences in the fact that you could be reading a case about another country about things that you don't even know about. But a lot of times, I've actually found myself in one of my classes where I was taking on like the American perspective of a company in another country. And so I was saying, well, why don't we do this, this, and this? And I was rudely awakened by when the professor said, that would be completely, disrespectful in this country, or they don't approve of things like that, because you got to take into consideration that their cultural differences are going to affect your business plan. And I had that mentality, like, go in there, make it happen. And I remember my professor saying, from an American perspective, that's great, that would be very successful. But now put yourself in that position and start thinking, well, they don't agree, they don't agree in terms of this. They prefer diversification rather than, focusing on one little thing. They like teamwork rather than a lot of independence. And you learn a lot of that in HR classes and international classes. And it's very important to kind of see, how the boundaries kind of either are, blur or where they're clearly defined. And so, I've definitely had classes where You know, I come in with that American perspective, like just get it done, independent. You know, everybody gets their own in the scenario, and then I wonder why they when you find out the actual results of a case, I'm like, wow, that is not what I did, and you realize how off you were because you don't know the cultural differences. So it's a great way to learn them, because then as you go on, you start to realize that you can't just do it the American way, you can't just do it the European way. It's very different.
Language teachers have a keen appreciation for cross-cultural learning. In the video interviews, you probably noticed that business faculty and students also see this as a benefit of using cases. But there was one aspect that nearly everyone found particularly valuable. Did you catch it? The key word is perspective. Business cases make you view a culture from a different perspective. According to the National Standards for Foreign Language Learning, students should demonstrate an understanding of the relationship between products and practices and the underlying beliefs and values or perspectives of the culture studied. Business cases make this goal achievable in several ways. They take you beyond the textbook, placing you directly into a cross-cultural context. This is hands-on learning at its best, where you have to deal with the consequences of any different cultural values. With cases, you're not simply being made aware of cultural differences as an intellectual exercise. You're experiencing the culture by having to independently execute decisions that hinge on cultural issues. Lastly, business cases make it possible to see beyond your own culture. When you step into the shoes of another culture, you're getting a whole new way of seeing the world around you. Now that you're fully informed on some key benefits of teaching and learning with business cases, you're ready to think seriously about using cases in your own teaching. Chapter 4 of the e-Handbook introduces helpful strategies applicable to both the business and language classrooms. Thanks for watching this portion of the e-Handbook on teaching with business cases. The e-Handbook was made possible by the Center for International Business Education and Research at the George Washington University. Funding for All Cybers is provided by the U.S. Department of Education through the Title VI grant program to increase and promote the nation's capacity for international understanding and economic enterprise.